Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and today we are taking a look at a Chinese Type 63 rifle. This is a rifle that is often, I think, misunderstood as being some sort of variation on a full auto SKS, when in reality it's not. Now the design here is largely, consider it like a hybrid of the AK and the SKS, and in fact its design parameters really were a hybrid of the AK and the SKS. So if we go back a little bit before this, we have a People's Republic of China that is primarily armed with, well, the Type 56, because in 1956 they adopted 3 different guns, all largely taken from the Russian system. They had the SKS as their standard rifle, they had the AK as the sort of stand-in for a submachine gun, for officers, for paratroops, for mechanized troops, someone who would have gotten a subgun, they get an AK. And then they had the RPD as their standard squad automatic weapon. In China, these were all adopted the same year, so they're all called the Type 56. However, in service, what the Chinese found was that the SKS was effectively accurate, but didn't have enough firepower, and the AK had enough firepower, but wasn't suitably accurate. And so what they tried to do with the Type 63 was combine both of those elements. So what we have here is fundamentally an AK rotating bolt system with an SKS gas system. The general configuration of an SKS, it's got a longer barrel than the AK, but it has a detachable magazine, obviously taken from the AK. Now, these actually aren't 100% interchangeable with AK mags, but we'll get to that in a moment. So development of this began in either 1959 or 1960. It was type classified as the Type 63, and the information I have says it was adopted into service in 1968. So you'll occasionally see a Type 68 reference. It's incorrect, but that refers to the date of actually guns really getting into the hands of the military. Now, in testing, this was apparently very effective. It did, in fact, have the reliability and the firepower of the AK with the accuracy of the SKS. What actually happened in service and in mass production may have been a bit different, but we'll get to that in a moment. First, let's take a closer look at this. I'm really excited to take it apart for you, show you how it all works, because there's so many elements here that are obviously derived from other guns in Chinese production, the AK and the SKS primarily. So let's dive right in. All right, where to start? Well, as usual, let's go to the receiver markings first. We have here the factory number, factory 376 manufactured this example. It is a 63 type 63, and a serial number. So these start at 1 million. This is number 779, really a very early example. Moving on to the controls, we have obviously a trigger group down here with a 3-position selector switch. So back here at the 0 position is safe. Downward at 1 is semi-automatic, and forward at 2 is fully automatic. We have a manually usable dust cover here, so if I take this and just push it forward, I can cover up that open slot in the receiver. This, by the way, is the slot that on the AK is covered by the safety. So once that's in position, we have a couple little detents here in this spring steel plate that hold it in place. So that's why you've got this separate plate riveted onto the top cover. It's to keep this in position. And when you cycle the rifle, when you fire it, for example, it's going to automatically open that dust cover, but then that remains open until you manually close it. Now you can see here the magazine has locked open because it is empty. We have an AK style mag release here. These magazines are recognizable. They are 20-round magazines, so they're short. They're the same length as the Hungarian 20-round tanker mags, and they have these 2 ribs on them. There is also a second variation that has a 5-pointed star in the middle of those ribs, and in fact, there is a third variation, which is polymer. So black with this texturing on the inside. So those are your 3 variations of Chinese Type 63 magazines. Now, I mentioned that these are not directly interchangeable with AK mag, so let me expand on that. This is an AK mag, standard 30-round AK. Here's our Type 63. Notice there is a square tube tunnel, basically, on the back of the Type 63 magazine. That is for a bolt hold open tab. So on the back of the follower, we have this tab and we have this open slot in the back of the magazine. We don't have either of those things on the AK mag. Looking inside the Type 63, we have this tab. The magazine pushes that up and it catches the bolt and locks the bolt open. The problem is, because there's no slot cut in the back of the AK mag, it won't quite fit in all the way. The dimensions at the top are the same, like the front catches are essentially the same, and in fact a Type 63 mag can be used in an AK because this is profiled the same on the side, as you can see there. However, this, because of this flat surface on the back of the follower right here, this will lock an AK bolt open until you take the magazine out, kind of like the Yugoslav magazines, then the bolt will drop closed. So it's one-way interchangeable. 63s can go in an AK, but AK mags cannot go in a Type 63. Moving on, we have a very much AK or SKS style of rear sight here, graduated out to 1,000 meters. That works just like a regular rifle sight. The front end of the gun is very clearly copied from the SKS. We have a front sight that is around threaded in posts, so you have access to it from the top there to screw it in up and down, and then the whole front sight drum here can be pushed left to right to set your windage. There is a cleaning rod stowed there, and we have a folding, permanently attached bayonet. So I just pull this back, flip it out forward, and it's going to lock in place right there. Note that this is not an SKS bayonet. They're visually mostly distinguishable by having a longer tapered section at the front. It's a three-prong spike bayonet. The mechanism is fundamentally the same as the SKS, but the two bayonets are not interchangeable. Now, disassembly. We're going to start with the trigger mechanism, and there's this little lever in the back of the trigger mechanism. So I have a universal disassembly tool here. I'm going to use that to help me pry that little lever up. We're going to lift this 90 degrees up. That's going to release the trigger mechanism. This is clearly based on the SKS, but frankly, this is a much better solution than the SKS's little spring-loaded tab. You can see that we still have a spring back here to keep the whole thing in tension and in correct orientation, but this lever is frankly a lot easier to open up than the SKS type. Once that lever is open, I can then just lift this up and slide it out. There are two little hooks, right, or two notches there and there. And the front of the trigger guard has these two posts that lock in right in there. And then you have the lever right here, which when it's open, you've got this cutout cylinder that locks in place like that. So fairly similar to our SKS hammer spring. It is hammer fired. This is both your ejector and your auto trip. So in full auto position there, that is fully held back. Once we trip this, it's going to pop up to the second notch, and then pulling the trigger releases the hammer forward. When the hammer comes back, it's going to lock back until the bolt goes forward over this auto sear. That ensures that the hammer doesn't follow the bolt. It waits until the bolt is fully locked, then this is tripped, which immediately releases the hammer. So rate of fire on this is allegedly about 750 rounds a minute, which is pretty typical for a rifle like this. With the fire control group removed, we can just pop the stock off the gun. On this case, I have a sling attached here, so my stock sort of remains attached to the action of the gun. We'll put the stock up there. Worth noting here, this bears a lot of similarity to an SKS stock. You got the spring, you got the cutout for the safety. We do have a serial number there. Also, worth pointing out, we have a somewhat different sort of cleaning kit storage. You've got a butt plate here with a spring-loaded button. If I push that down, I can open this up, and I have two compartments, like an SKS. One of these would be for cleaning rod, one of them would be for a tool kit. There's nothing in there right now, but that's how this system works. Snap that back in place. I can now push in this little spring-loaded button, and I can pull the dust cover backwards. There we go. That will slide off the back. We get it back to here, and then it lifts up on the side. Nothing really to it, it's just a sheet metal dust cover. Bolt carrier and main spring. The main spring is connected to this block, which is set in there. So we can take this and lift it up and out. It is a captive recoil spring. That leaves us with the bolt. We pull this back to, where is it, about there. And again, the bolt pivots out of the receiver. So what you're going to need to do is actually tilt it out of the gun that way. And then we have the bolt, and that is totally an AK bolt. I mean, it's not actually interchangeable with the AK, but this is a bolt design that was obviously taken directly from the AK. So it's a rotating bolt. We have a carrier that doesn't really look like an AK bolt carrier. If anything, it kind of looks like a Czech VZ52 bolt carrier. It is, of course, a short stroke piston, so that's why we don't see anything up here, where the AK is a long stroke piston that has the op rod and gas piston directly attached to this. I did forget to mention earlier, you have a stripper clip guide. So again, kind of like the M14, this can be used with a single magazine and reloaded with stripper clips. The stripper clip is the same as the SKS clip, of course. I think it's interesting to look at the receiver here and note how fundamentally similar it is to the SKS receiver. These originally were milled guns, so obviously you can see this is a milled receiver. We have our bolt hold open here that looks like, design-wise, looks very similar to the SKS. We've got the same trigger hooks here to hold the fire control group in. You've got this rear column. Like, a lot of this looks like it was fundamentally based on the SKS. Now, I want to take a moment as an aside here and point out this. This is the later version of the Type 63. So this one, we have a serial number that's 160,000 higher and has an additional front digit. Like, there's a lot different here. This one's marked from factory 26. We have 63 type, I believe, but written in different characters. We have a polymer or Bakelite front handguard on it. We have a number of small detailed differences, like the design of the gas piston, or the gas block out here. So large diameter, small diameter. But most substantially, you can see these two rivets and this rivet back here. The late pattern of Type 63 actually used a stamped receiver with a milled trunnion. So if we look in there, we can kind of see an AK style milled trunnion inside a stamped receiver. Now, I'm not going to take this one apart because there's about a metric cubic meter of cosmoline sitting inside this one. It's really gross inside. But I did want to show you that there was a later pattern of the Type 63 that used a stamped receiver instead of milled. All right, but back to our standard milled gun here. Last thing we're going to come to is the gas system. So this is a two-position gas system. There's a regular setting and an adverse or dirty setting, but it's not quick change. So in order to change the gas system, what I have to do is push this lever in, which will unlock it. It kind of snaps in place right there. So I push that in, I rotate it around, and I actually pull this lever, this pin, all the way out. Now I can pull this gas plug out, and you can see we have a large gas port and a small one. So when I had it in this direction, the large port up here, that was using the small gas port. That's going to run gas from the barrel up into the gas piston system. In order to switch it to adverse, I flip it around, push it back into place, and then manually replace this pin. So there it is now in the adverse condition. It's interesting. It's rare to see a gas regulator that can be adjusted like this that is adjustable but not quick adjustable. So anyway, to show you disassembly, we'll pull this back out. We'll remove the gas plug. That then allows me to pull the handguard off. the handguard here actually has a fully enclosed section at the front. So you have to put this on and then slide it back in order to assemble or disassemble it. We then have our actual gas piston, which I can pull out the front. There we go, the front of the gas port there. We have our gas piston spring and the piston itself. So this is going to go just like an SKS. It's going to go back into the rear sight block, and when it cycles, it comes back right there to hit the top of the bolt carrier right in here and push the whole thing rearward to cycle. So it's a short stroke gas piston system. And there you have the Chinese Type 63, the early, which I believe is the standard and more common milled version, completely field stripped. Unfortunately, I don't have any good numbers for exactly when this was produced or exactly how many. Best inference I can find is 1 million or so manufactured. And what was found in the field is that it failed to meet the standards, it failed to live up to the standards of the guns that were in the testing. It appears that once these went into mass production, there were a lot of problems. The mass production guns weren't up to the same quality control or manufacturing standards as the test guns had been. That's something that can often happen. Frankly, the M14 in the US is a perfect example of basically the same thing happening at almost the same time. So these didn't meet expectations in the field, and as a result, they were actually pulled out of service in the early 1970s. Again, kind of like the M14. A lot of them were apparently sent to Albania. That seems to be the country where they're most prominent after China was done using them. And then a bunch of them were used as export guns to especially places in Africa. So you will still see these guns floating around in all sorts of global conflict zones, especially in the Middle East and North Africa. Guns that get in there tend to stick around for a very long time. The Type 63, with its standard 7.62x39 cartridge and its ready availability, is no exception. Now, eventually, so when these were pulled out of service, they were replaced by the old Type 56 series, all three of them. And the Chinese Army, the PRC, or the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, would actually continue to use the SKS and the AK for quite some time to come. And when they got into the Sino-Vietnamese War in 1979, they were still using those guns as their primary frontline infantry weapons. And they were at that point really quite obsolete, especially the SKS. It was 10-round fixed mag semi-auto only rifle, and the RPD, the Type 56 RPD, was a pretty expensive gun to be manufacturing. And it was at that point that China really sort of made the bureaucratic decision to upgrade its guns. And that's when we see development of the next pattern of rifle that China would adopt, which would be the Type 81. But it's not a linear progression of the Type 56 to this Type 63 to the Type 81. It's actually this, and then they revert back to the Type 56 SKS for a while before eventually developing the Type 81. So we'll cover the Type 81 in a later video. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this look at the Type 63 as select fire rifles. These have never been imported in any quantity into the United States because they are machine guns. I think we have a few of them that came back as Vietnam bringbacks from the Vietnam War, but they are extremely scarce in the United States, and it was very cool to get a chance to show this one to you. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.